Welcome, everybody, to this AEBC training on teamwork. And tonight we're going to focus in on virtual teamwork. Just as a reminder, this event will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. If you are watching this now on YouTube, please remember to subscribe to our channel and check us out on Facebook, as well as on our website, blindcanadians.ca. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for asking me to do this training. Because it's not a large group tonight, I hope that we can have a great conversation about some of the things we've worked on as a team, and where we need to go as a team, and where anyone who wants to participate in a virtual manner or with a group where the primary goal is to make changes to a system, knowing that there's going to be heavy discussion, there's going to be different opinions, but then there's going to need to be action taken. That's what this is all about. So I've been involved in working with teams since I was a kid, played on sports teams, which is what many people think of. I've been on academic teams, and have been working with volunteers, not necessarily who work in the same office as I have, for over 30 years. And so working as a team when the people aren't right in front of you it comes kind of naturally to someone who's worked in the nonprofit world. And when I was preparing for this, I did a quick review of things, and I remember it's a book that I have. It's called Building Effective Virtual and Remote Teams from 2003. And it's a lot different than it was then, but the concepts are still the same, which is open and honest communication, regular check-ins, and being prepared for everything you do, and providing feedback in a way that not necessarily you appreciate, but others appreciate. So we're gonna get to that. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do is to speak about a reminder about respectful communication, mute and unmute, how to use the chat, how to, put your hand up. But I'm not going to do that because I know the people on this screen, you're all pretty good at that. And I do notice that everybody's on mute anyway. You came in, you muted. So that's something that's really good. Now, in many situations, if it's a team meeting, you won't have that, but in this type of environment, you will. It's always a good idea in any situation, if you're unfamiliar, to come in and mute. And then if someone asks you to unmute, you're good. Assume you know how to do it, because everybody has been able to do it that I've seen here at AEBC, and go with the flow. That I think for any type of virtual team meeting, go with the flow is a great thing to think about. So I want to provide a little bit of context. I did provide a little bit right at the beginning, but we kind of doubled in size in terms of participation, in the last 5 minutes. So I'll just do it again. This session is about AEBC, its mission, its vision, its core values. It's about advocacy. It's about making decisions. It's sometimes about editing documents in screen and working together on something where not everybody may disagree, where you may have to vote on something, and where there may be a lot of shared stories and opinions. And that's what this is all about, because there's lots of different teams. And for me to start using analogies about sports teams or political teams, things that are on right now that everyone's paying attention to, I don't think we need to do that. We should just talk about what we're doing here at AEBC, but know that what we're doing really does work with any other volunteering you do, especially in the virtual environment. So what is our priorities? Our priorities are advocacy, inclusion, independence, and training people and working with the individual to prepare each other and to assist each other so that everyone can come together and help make the systemic changes that make the people, our members and Canadians in general, lives better. That's what we're trying to do. And so let's bring that to every meeting. That's really important, is to have that goal, whether we're doing advocacy, communications, training, organizing an event, or even doing something as simple as doing the finance committee meetings, or checking on something like an investment committee. Everybody here has played different roles. So knowing what you come in to do is really important, and sticking to the agenda. So our members contribute to these goals every day. AEBC has, over the last year, had about 60 different people who've participated in some way, shape, or form on a committee, in a one-time meeting, who've spoken up at our chats. If you take a look at the weekly chats, if you take a look at the discourse that we've had in the emails and back and forth and on our mailing list, it's well over half of the people who are members that are doing that. We are actually quite an active group, but there is a core leadership that work in a virtual team environment, and we'll speak on that. And our members provide advice, they provide lived experience, they share stories that are relevant. And what I want to do over the next little while is, remind everybody, that to bring that passion in a professional manner to enhance AEBC and get those goals. So just for anyone who's watching and maybe looking at this who may not be here, we stay in touch with each other in many different ways. We have the Equalizer. We spoke earlier about Monday Morsels. We have email lists. We have Zoom meetings. We share chats on different days. Some of our groups have in-person events. And so we stay in touch in many different ways, but we are, for the most part, a virtual organization. And what our communication style has been is it's polite, but it's honest, and it's supportive, and it's clear. Those are four really important pillars. And we want to talk about giving feedback the right way, because really, when you think about a lot of what we do, is we are giving feedback. We're giving feedback to each other. We're giving feedback to municipal governments about transportation, to provincial governments about legislation or human rights cases, and federal governments about legislation, about standards, and a whole bunch of other things. So we provide a lot of feedback. And doing that in the polite, honest, and supportive and clear way is a great way of doing things. Now, there are many instances where, as advocates, you have to speak more clearly than politely, and I understand that. But that's something that we want to just broach a little bit later on. But what this is about is not about a presentation style externally, but how we work with each other. So the other important part of the basics of communication is to understand your own limitations. You may not know what's going on at all points. You may not have the lived experience that others have. And there's not a problem with that. And no matter who you are, if you want to participate, please participate. There's no problem if you don't know what's going on. The only problem arises is when you don't ask. Either ask beforehand, ask for clarification, or even ask in the meeting. That's really important. And I always encourage people, don't apologize for asking. Be polite, be yourself, but asking is a great way of clarifying. It helps the presenter clarify their thoughts, and it ensures that people take that second step back and become part of the team. So just a quick thing on some virtual participation basics. I'm going to go through this very quickly. Is know the system, know Zoom for us here, or whatever system you may be looking at, and practice. I've noticed in the 2 years that I've been here, when we had 12 or 13 people on, it sometimes took 10 or 15 minutes to get ourselves adjusted, because not everybody was familiar with Zoom. And now, like I noticed, it's automatic. So that's a great shift in our membership, that everybody gets it, or everybody who's participating gets it. And I know, and never apologize for the technology, because as we all know, we'll get into a Zoom meeting on the first of the month and the whole thing is set up differently because Zoom decided it was going to change things. Because when I taught at Georgian College, the way to submit the final marks in a class was really complicated. It wasn't user friendly. You couldn't go back. If you made a mistake and you give somebody a 97 instead of a 79 as marks, or worse, the vice versa, you actually had to go to the dean to get it changed. It was really tough and I hated it. And I needed help for my first 3 years there. And did I not want to ask for help? I certainly didn't, but I also didn't want to make mistakes. So I needed help for my first 3 years, because I only did it once a year because I only taught one class a year. In my fourth year, I taught 3 classes a year. So that at the end of that year, I knew how to use the system. And so this is no different. Practice what you're doing and go forward. The other really basic thing is to come prepared and have some time management. You have the responsibility as a team member. You have the responsibility to read the materials and understand the concepts. If you don't know something and it seems core to the issue, call the person who's running the meeting in advance, check in, and do that. Time management is also important. It's difficult always to get in at 7:59 for an 8 o'clock meeting, but like everybody here has done, there are some people that came in a little later. You came in, you didn't apologize, you just came in and you're part of the team. That's great. That's the exact way to do it. Again, I'll say this just because I know there's others who may be watching it, is minimize distractions. You know this, everyone's done it. And even if you're not muted or you're not sure, act as if you're muted. Because if you're not, then whoever's leading the charge will tell you to do it or ask you to do it. And it's really not a big deal. Just go, like I said, go with the flow. And then the final bit of preaching I'm going to do is about knowing the rules. Knowing the rules and the rules. We operate under a modified Roberts rule system, but that for the most part is irrelevant to our discussions. It's only during our formal proceedings that we have that. But in every team, in every presentation, in every group discussion, there are going to be leaders, whether it's Marcy as president, whether it's Chantal in the finance committee, whether it's Louise in our advocacy committee, Richard in the training committee. Everybody's going to play a leadership role. But know who that is when you're going into the meeting and let them run the meeting. That's important. We all know how to run meetings. We're all good at it, but let that person take control and run that meeting. The meeting will go smoother, even if it doesn't go exactly the way you want it to go. And assume that everyone has the best of intentions. We're all here for the same purpose. I'm the only one getting paid to be here. So when you're here, we're assuming you're here because you care about the topic and you care about AEBC. Assume that with everybody else. Even if they disagree, even if their story doesn't seem to jive with yours, but assume there's a best intention. And for that reason, I always count to 5 before asking a question or challenging something. And it's okay, we'll talk about challenging, because different perspectives have different truths. Anyone who's taken the GBA plus training or has been involved in any sort of reconciliation or DEI formal training knows that different perspectives have different truths, and we need to respect that. So before I go on and talk a little bit about some discussion and all of that, I invite anyone here to ask any questions, anything for clarification, or raise a point that you say, are you going to cover this? This is the right time to do that. Great. I'm assuming, yeah, I counted to 10 quickly, that nobody made a stir, nobody unmuted. Going to move on. So what's one of the biggest things we do at AEBC? We have discussions. We have discussions before meetings start, during meetings, and after meetings. Understand that when you're in AEBC, whether you're the chair or not, it's not your discussion. It's AEBC's discussion. It's part of the team. If yeah, if a hockey player thinks the puck is theirs all the time, the team isn't going to win. They're also going to get smashed into the boards a lot more. They're also going to make their teammates frustrated. And the whole goal is to entertain people by scoring goals and not getting scored on. So really, the puck isn't theirs in a hockey game. They play a role. They may play a very important role, a very forward role, a very defensive role. But in the conversation, the puck is part of the game, and that's the way we really need to discuss that. So it's simple. Wait your turn. Let everybody speak. Unlike a Leafs and Senators game, there are no winners or losers. And I always feel that giving credit is more important than taking it. That's something I've really appreciated, by the way, with AEBC. This is a great group of that, and there's not a lot of ego that comes out, and people say, well, this was my idea. Everyone's really good at giving credit, and it's something that I'm really appreciative of with AEBC. And be prepared for disagreement. That's part of the game when you're doing advocacy, when you're talking about technical things, and when you have different perspectives. So be prepared for that. Are there any questions around discussion? Great. So the next thing I want to talk about is giving and receiving feedback. This is something that we do on a regular basis, both to external parties and to each other. And what's important is that we're kind, we're specific, and we're focused in on improvement. We're improving a document if we're putting a standard out. We're improving legislation. We're improving transportation. We're improving air travel. That's really what we want to do. We're not the media. We're not trying to poke holes or drive a sensationalistic story. We're not the opposition party. We're focusing in on improvement, and that's an important part of giving and receiving feedback. Ask for clarification. If someone says something and you don't quite get it, or you don't quite disagree, ask for clarification. Something like, help me understand what you just said, or can you give me an example of that? Or sometimes you turn it around, it's like, okay, what I heard was this. Is that correct? Always give the person a second chance to restate what they wanted to say, and don't correct them automatically. And that's important. And if you assume something, right? Because we all do. We all come at things with our own lived experience. You know what? Just say that. I'm assuming what you meant was this. Right? That's an okay statement. It's a strong statement, but that's fine, right? That's how we make change. So if you say, I'm assuming you mean this, because that lets the person receiving the feedback know you've got an opinion as well. You are listening to what they said. You value what they said, but you may disagree, or you may agree. You may be agreeing, but it makes everybody take notice. It's a really powerful tool. I'm assuming you mean the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win it in 4. Right? You may not have said that. You may have said, no, I am, what I really meant was, I think they're going to win it in 7 games, not 4. Simple clarification, get the point across, but it helps people clarify what they want to say. Hello, Vangelis.
Hello.
Hello.
Is this a hockey discussion?
Sorry?
Is this a discussion about hockey?
For a little bit it was, yes.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna ask you to mute Vangelis, but what we're doing is I'm doing a presentation and I stop and give everybody the opportunity to ask questions. So great. So the other part of this is, how to take feedback. That's always hard. Guilty as charged on that one sometimes for me. What's important is that you listen first. Again, you ask questions. I'm assuming this is what you meant, or, why are you asking that? And don't take it personally. Again, if you're focused in on the outcome of the meeting or the outcome of the discussion, it's not about how you worded something. When someone is asking for a change, it's usually because they want that outcome to be the best it can be. Right? So if everybody agrees on something, you move forward. People tend to take a little bit of slack on that, and you get a really good document. If there's some disagreement or some changes, especially if not everybody agrees with those changes right up at the beginning, I find at the end you have a great document. So giving and receiving feedback helps you go from good to great, as long as it's done in a professional manner. You can agree with respect. Don't spend a lot of time if you agree. Disagree with care, right? Because someone may be saying the same as you, just saying it in a different manner. And again, ask those curious questions. That's really important to do. And then another part of giving and receiving feedback is, understand the importance and the significance of what you're talking about. So if it's a minor item such as wording, grammar, technical style issues, don't spend a lot of time on that. Those are literally better done offline. There's a few instances where, a technical term, a definition, it's something that goes exactly with a resolution we've passed in the in previous board members or something, that it is really important that the wording is exact. Clarify that, right? Okay, I want to take some time. I really want to define the word deaf blind. And please remember that that has to be capitalized. Why? Because the deafblind community has asked, and it's been something that they've cared about, to have it be capitalized. So that's a great way of correcting that, and hopefully the changes don't have on that. Is there any questions or comments on giving and receiving feedback?
It's Linda. I'll just speak up.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, just you sort of touched on it, but just to to perhaps expand it a little bit more, is thinking about when it's appropriate. Like sometimes, as you say, take it offline. Maybe it's more appropriate to give that feedback to an individual as opposed to in the meeting itself. And just think about that in terms of when that might be appropriate, and when. Yeah, so timing.
Yeah, timing is it, right? That's a really good point, and I appreciate you you mentioning it, because it's a lot about about minimizing distractions, right? So is what you're going to say be a distraction to the bigger point? It's about coming prepared. I always appreciate it, and there's a few people online, and there's a few who aren't, who say, look, I read your thing. I have a couple of questions. This is what they're about. And, sometimes there's something that I can just respond back and say, okay, this is what I meant. Or, yes, you're right. I did put in April 1st instead of May 1st. And I'll mention that at the meeting at the beginning. That's really helpful. That's great feedback. And then, if it's a minor item or if it's a clarification, something, you can clear that up right away, because guaranteed, this is a pretty good group that if you notice it, somebody else has as well. And there's a really good way of helping people change and improve some of the work they deliver without embarrassing someone, especially around minor items, by doing any corrections privately. That's important. But again, if it's part of the discussion, it's okay to do that. And so timing is important. And again, mention that I've got some minor wording changes, or that type of thing. Is it appropriate to talk about it now, or should I bring it offline? And usually someone will say, yeah, let's bring it offline. But again, if it's really core to the issue, it's okay to bring it up. And hopefully the leader of the conversation is going to do, something that says, okay, Marcy, what do you think? Linda, Chantel, Lisa, and go through the list and be prepared for that. And again, we talked at the beginning of this, for those who came in a little later, about who's going to be hosting this presentation. So if you're not comfortable, looking at the chats and checking the hands up or helping manage questions, that's okay. Ask for help. That's what the co-host feature is good for on Zoom. And it's always good to have a backup, because we all get things that happen. My dog may be barking in the background. Someone may ring a doorbell. There's always things that happen, especially in a virtual meeting. And if you know that you can count on someone to at least, hold the line for 2 minutes, that's really important as well. So, having that backup is good, and knowing your role. So, anything else on giving and receiving feedback? Now, there's a different part of giving and feedback that I'm just going to briefly speak about, and that's and I'm going to use a big word here, and I don't like using this word. It's asynchronous communication, which we do a lot of. And what that means is, in this meeting, we have synchronous communications, like face-to-face time communication. Linda asked me a question or pointed something out, and I responded, and we all heard it all at the same time. But because we're in different time zones, because some people work different hours, volunteer in other organizations, and it's not always possible to have that sort of face-to-face real-time conversations all the time. So that's what our email is for. That's what our Dropbox is for, and the chat in the group is for. If you're doing that, that's just as valuable in many, many ways. That is just as valuable. Again, it gives you time to think about things as a person. And if you prefer that, that's okay, even if you're in this type of environment. But you need to be just as prepared to do it. One of the things that I know happens a lot in many organizations is, I'll send an email at 8 o'clock in the morning, and someone else will get it. To them, it gets to them. They don't get to it at 9 o'clock till 9 o'clock at night, maybe even 9 o'clock at night, Calgary time. So in between that, there may have been a whole bunch of discussion. So if you see something, you want to comment on it, make sure you read the entire thread. That's just a little tip, because sometimes your question may have been answered and a document may have been changed. So that's just a little piece of advice on that. So in terms of giving and receiving feedback, that's just a little tip, is to make sure that you read all of the comments. So the other part of I want to speak to you about is just some of these soft skills. I've talked a lot about technical stuff, things you can Google, things that people put blog posts on LinkedIn. But this next part, I think, is really important to AEBC, and that's having confidence in your contribution, right? I have learned so much about technology, about the lived experience of people, who are blind, about how to operate my phone better, about different programs and software, because the experience that you have using screen readers is so much different than I have. Your lived experience is so much different than I have. Even getting around on public transportation, I've learned so much, and I've noticed some things when traveling and getting on airplanes that I wouldn't. And so you've got real contributions that, yeah, maybe Peg has a contribution that Louise understands, and Pat has something that Hilton understands. But don't assume when you're having the discussion that as a group, we remember those things, and the people you're writing it to, who definitely don't have that same lived experience, do. So it's okay to repeat yourself, right? That's one thing that we have to remember is if we say we have to make sure that, our documents are in this format, or that, you put on alt text on images. It's okay to say that a lot, right? That's really important. So even if you think something's minor or that everybody knows this, say it anyway, because it is a valuable contribution. Your voice really does matter. Say your piece. Come to the point right away. There's a tendency in casual conversation where people tell a story and then say, see how that proves my point? Which is a great conversation, good when you're all having drinks, and talking to each other. But in a Zoom meeting, it's sometimes better to come to the point and then say, and I'll give you an example, so that everybody pays attention to what you want to do in the outcome, and then you rationalize it at the end. So just build to that. So assume everybody is going to understand your point without your story, but be ready with your story anyway, because you may get feedback that I don't understand that, or my experience was different. Those are good feedback for people. And just remember, to be polite when people are telling a story, is because relevance is arbitrary, right? What I may not understand about, the environment in BC is irrelevant, right? But speaking about emergency preparedness in BC around wildflowers, wildfires, and around earthquakes, that's really important. And just because we don't necessarily have those in Ottawa doesn't mean that that's not a really big important topic for AEBC to discuss. And others matter too. Again, just like I said, listen to the story about what people are saying, as long as it's not too long, because it is relevant. And sometimes all of those stories can help you build one or two really good points. A quick thing that just came up that I want to address is how to speak up, even if you're new. You're new to this committee, you're new to that committee, you're new to AEBC. Simple, just speak up, right? Assume you're part of the team. This is a great group of individuals. I've never seen an instance where someone says, well, I've been around longer than you, so I'm not going to listen to you. Anytime someone comes in, whether they're new, first timers, or chimes in the group's discussion, you're treated as a peer. So assume that. And you know what? Just ask. You have the right, so please do that. And expect people to act the way you would, right? If you had someone to come up to you and ask you a question, you would most likely answer them in a polite manner. Assume that others are going to do the same. Again, if you're suggesting an idea that you may think be out of left field for some people, you can do that. Of course you can. To help brace people for something that they may not do that, just say, I'm not sure if anyone's going to disagree, but in my experience, or I read that, or I was told that. And again, focus on the topic, not the person or the presenter, or the story. Focus on the topic. Yeah. So then that's what we expect as team players. Be respectful, show up, and follow through. So do that even as a new person. So let's got another 20 minutes. So I'm going to just ask if you have any questions at this time or any comments on what I just spoke about. Linda has
Me, it's Richard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Richard.
Okay. I'll let you go first.
Okay. We're all too polite.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. You know what? I've forgotten. You go first and I'll think what it was.
Okay. So I was just back to your point about, the people that have been around a lot longer. Like, I'm wondering, like, sometimes, like, for those of us that have been around a lot longer, if we start kind of telling stories or bringing up issues that we may have worked on years ago, do you think that would be like, how do we soften that sort of storytelling or aspect of showing new people what's going on, to the point so they don't feel intimidated that their contribution, because like some people that are just new to organizations, like they start talking to the leadership or other people that have been involved a lot longer, then they automatically get intimidated and wonder how they can contribute. So how do we address those types of feelings from new people?
That's a really good question, Richard. It's kind of the the other side of the coin, from what I was saying. And um, again, I think it goes back to uh, you know act the way you would want someone to act towards you, or the way you think they want you to act. Someone may come up with an idea. Um, for example, there was some ideas, there were some things that brought forward about, in order to do training and for people to understand what we do, we're going to blindfold people and have them act blind for. We think that's a good idea, and we want you to help us do that. Right now, I can just feel the tension when I mention it, because that's it's something that is not necessarily approved of, and we have a statement.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
just lowering my blood pressure right now.
yeah, see, exactly. But you know what? That's part of the game, right? That's part of the thing. Is if you can lighten the situation without making fun of the person, that's really good. And tone, and especially the voice tone, is so important. There's a difference between, I'm lowering my blood pressure right now, and then the way you said it was great, rather than, oh, for sake, that's a different tone, right? It's a different way of responding to someone. And it just, this is, we hear that a lot, or, that was something that was a trend a few years ago, but we've made a resolution. The way you address it, that's not there. Why do you think why was that brought up? Because it was brought up by somebody else. Maybe they were suggested that happened, and someone just says, yeah, no, we don't do that, and then take it as a learning opportunity. Why is that not appropriate? Right? Because it's that topic. It's about improving the system. That's more important than correcting the person. Right? It is a little bit preachy, or can be a little bit preachy, but again, if done in a respectful manner, that's important. And the less said, the better, especially if it's a sensitive topic. Let the chair take over that, and say, yeah, that comes to us once in a while. It's not something we do, and we've actually made a resolution that speaks to not doing that. Let's talk about it offline, right? That's a great way of doing it, again, so it's not 9 people against 1 person, and they don't feel that way. Does that help, Richard?
Yeah, that's great answer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Linda.
Yeah. So, you again, you alluded to something in what you were saying, and so I'm asking the question: are you going to be speaking to follow up later on, or is this a good time to talk about it?
Why don't you ask right now? Follow up as in terms of
in a meeting, and everybody's responsibility to follow up. If you've agreed to do something, or you're part of a team that's supposed to be doing something, just being a good team player is making sure that you you take your responsibility and your obligations seriously and follow up. That would be, so I just wondered if you were going to speak to that.
Yeah, that's actually the very next thing I'm
Oh,
speaking.
well, there we go.
So, you got that whole segue thing happening for us. So that's good. Thanks.
Okay.
Is there any questions before I move on?
It's Louise.
Yes.
Okay, you brought something that is very, very sometimes hard when you've got people in a meeting and you've got ones who want to dominate. Though you might be the chair, or you might be sort of trying to keep track of time to help the person who's chairing that meeting, and there's somebody who's dominating and they just want to dominate everything. How do you, it's a very hard thing sometimes to balance, especially if you're trying to be the keeper of the time or the chair of the meeting. So could you maybe give us a few little tips how to maybe manage that?
Yeah, I certainly can. And I really appreciate you asking the question, Louise, because you're right. Again, we have a lot of passionate and knowledgeable people, and that shows and that comes through. But if it becomes a distraction or takes away from the goal, it's not a good thing. And I always relate it back to something that I learned when I was doing how to do presentation, was taking a course on how to do a presentation. And there was a really good instructor that we had on how to give an effective presentation. And he would critique your presentation, your 5-minute presentation, in a way that, that he focused in on everything you said and you really became a good presenter. But he never did it in a way that embarrassed you or did it in a way that interrupted your train of thought, right? Because he knew that what was important was important. So the one story that really always sticks with me is it was in a group sharing session that we had, and this was part of the the classroom, and there was one of the students come up and did a really bad presentation, and he asked the person, he said, he says, I can tell by your action you knew that that wasn't the best presentation you've ever given. And the person said, yeah, I was really tough. And he said, what did you just say? And he said, and the student replied back, yeah, I didn't give a good presentation. And he said, no, you said I didn't give a presentation. And he said, and this is something that stuck with me. He said, within 2 minutes of your presentation, I counted 100 times you said Said, I didn't remember anything else from that presentation except how many times you said And he said, but you had some great points in your presentation, but it was the ums that took over for it. And pointing out something like that to someone who dominates, and sorry, I'm taking a little bit longer than I want to come to the conclusion of this, it's about timing, right? So getting into a confrontation with someone who's a dominant speaker doesn't always work, because there's a personality clash. But afterwards saying, I didn't feel like I got a chance to speak, or I was paying attention and I noticed that not everybody had a chance to speak. Can we remember to do that next time? Right? Or do something that says, can we stick to an agenda? Can we have an agenda? Or offer your advice and say, look, I really want this to happen, but I think we need to make it work in a teamwork environment. Can I help you next time by monitoring the timing? And if they give you permission, just take it. Lee, you're talking too much. You had your 2 minutes. Let's go. Right? Most people, again, assume the best from everybody, are really going to move on, and they want that. So, but if you don't have that, it's okay to reach out to me. It's okay to reach out to Marcy and ask for advice, right? Or anyone on the board. You don't have to do it in a, this person's doing this. You say, I have I want to participate, but I'm having issues. So that's a way to do it. Richard, you have a hand up?
Oh, can I ask
Yeah,
a
no, I
question?
just, sorry, I just wanted to say that to say, on your point about saying and I was thinking about current sort of politicians or public speakers that do that, and the former prime minister was great for saying I noticed that the current like the current, like in the current campaign, that all three of the party leaders don't do that, I may not agree with some of their messages, but it makes them much better public speakers. I noticed, for example, Mark Carney, when he's thinking about what to say, he just pauses, and yet he might have a second or two of silence, but it's not mixed up with ums, and you still get a better sense of what he's trying to say, even with the pauses.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And whereas Pierre Poilievre is a very dominant speaker, Mark Carney is not. Both have very effective communication styles in different ways. And again, knowing that and understanding that is important. Nancy, you had something?
Yeah, I know it's not the answer, but I'd like to know, like when you do ground rules and housekeeping rule, what is the best way to do one, and how do you present it? And when people are over talking to each other, like one person tries to control, not to be rude, but what would you suggest? Like, I'm just curious, like, is that something?
There's if it happens once, right, it's going to happen. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Everyone's going to get overexcited about something, be really passionate. But if it continues, right, and you're dreading the next meeting, or you're saying, I don't want to bother anymore, I think going back to saying, what, can we have some ground rules for these meetings, right? Again, focus in. This is an AEBC meeting. We have some rules. We have some templates. Let's follow them. Our advocacy committee meeting is way more wild, than our governance committee and our finance committee meetings, because it should be, because it's advocacy. It's about passion. Whereas, the governance stuff is, making sure our whereases are in the right place. So it's okay. But if it is an issue, then just say, can we stick to the rules? And, be honest. I'm having a hard time participating because, I'm not hearing my voice. I'm not hearing everybody else's voice. I really like this style. Can we do that? Asking permission is really important, with a dominant speaker, and following the rules. When we do the AGM, for example, we have sometimes over 60 people. We had a lot of discussion. So what we did, when we looked at the last one, not the last AGM, but when we said were we going to allow sighted people on the board at national level, we felt that it could be controversial. There could be a lot of passion that arose out of it. So we said, here are the rules. This is the way we're going to do it. This, this is the, how we do dispute resolution, and we prepared everybody for it. And then, Marcy led the discussion, and I managed, and in Robert's rules, it's called a sergeant at arms, which, I'm not my best term. I don't like that term. But so I was the host. So I managed the flow of the conversation while Marcy chaired the meeting. It comes to that, and sometimes it does take steps, and we have to be patient with that. And again, don't try and do it alone, right? Everybody here knows that advocacy doesn't happen alone. So if you stand up and you write one letter to the government, it's going to get ignored. But if we write 1,000 letters, or 1,000 people write the same letter, there's more people going to pay attention to it. So one person says something, it can be ignored. One person says something and the media takes it up, and it's repeated 1,000 times. It's an important part of advocacy. So again, don't go it alone. Ask for advice. We're all really good at understanding the situation, and realize that if you feel that someone's being overly dominant, you're probably not the only one, right?
Mhm. Yes.
And
Thank
and in my experience, when you can have a conversation or you ask someone to have a conversation offline, they're not embarrassed. 99% of the time, what I've heard when I've been in that situation is, yeah, my kids tell me all the time I talk too much. Or, yeah, my coworkers tell me, I do that. Again, we've got a great group of people. We just sometimes need to be reminded, that we have to put the professionalism as well as our passion into our volunteering.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. We're coming to the end of our time. But AEBC is in action. It's about being part of a team. It's about contributing. And so how can you do that? What are the action steps you can do? It's not just about how you interact with people, it's the fact that you do interact that is important. So you can write an article, you can write a blog post, you can ask a question, you can make one simple statement in the group chat or the groups.io to members, and say something that's important. Take that first step, because if it's something that interacts with people or you get a lot of feedback, maybe I'll ask you and say, that's really good. Can we work together and write a blog post and we'll put it up there? And it's that first step that really matters. Post a blog or notice, as much as you want, ask the question. I came up with this happened to me when I went to go vote. Let I had an awful situation when I voted, or I had a great situation. Share those little stories. We recently did a feedback, which I think many people were engaged with, a great survey about what to do, and people want to hear that. You may say, well, nobody wants to hear the fact that I went to the election and it was an okay, smooth thing. No, you know what? We really do. Our members really want to hear that one simple statement. Why? Because they may be afraid they're going to have a hard time voting. Okay. But if you can tell them it was smooth when I went, I was able to do this, that's really encouraging. That is exactly what our members want to hear. You can also get involved on committees, one-time tasks, advocacy, short bursts of information. We had people help us out on a risk assessment. We're doing a review of past resolutions. We had cross-committee help with that. It's all good, right? We really want you to be involved, and be involved on something that matters to you. So if you don't want to get involved in the advocacy committee, but you have something that you're passionate about in your town or with your situation, come to an advocacy committee meeting, ask for advice, get them to help you, because then you become a better advocate, and AEBC helps everybody. It's those small things. Linda asked something about, checking in and following through and all of that. Again, yeah, you know what? There's a lot of people who don't participate, right? They may hit like on Facebook. They may just watch the hockey game. They may just watch TV. But our members are here for a reason. And if you do come, and make a suggestion, be prepared to follow up, at least on part of it. Ask for help. I want to do something, I can't do it alone, but follow through. It's part of time management. You know that you're going to be asked to do it. And if you're not sure, say, well, what are my next steps? Ask that question. Again, we've got some great people giving advice. But there's, as Richard said, there's a lot of people been around a long time and may know the next steps of what to do and may assume you do. But if you're not sure, just ask for clarification. Yeah, how would I like to do that? What's my next step when I do that? Is there something you can send me in writing so I can follow up on it? I don't forget. But then support each other, check in, be flexible. If you're the chair of a committee, check in a week before, say, hey, does anybody have any agenda items? Here are the minutes, check things out. It's okay that if something goes from one meeting to next and nothing gets done once, that's fine. That's human nature. But if you say, yeah, I didn't do it, or I'm not finished yet, I'll get it for our May meeting, then it really is up to the chair to say, hey, we're 2 weeks away from the May meeting. How are things going? How can I help you? Right? The goal is the action item. It's the outcome. You're asking for assistance, and you're not checking in on the person, you're checking in on the outcome. Have that attitude and express that. We said we were going to get 75 people to take our survey. Lee, how's it going? Did you send out a reminder about the federal election? Two things that Marcy and Linda and Hilton and the rest of the board members have checked in on me on. And some of it was good news. Yeah, we had 80 people respond to our survey. That's great. Did you send out the election stuff? Yeah, I've been pounding the pavement on that one, but only the United Party of Canada and the NDP got back to us. Not everything's a success, but I know where things are, and it helps me manage my time. So that's really important. So just as we finish up here, it's about you as an individual being part of a team. And it's not a football team. It's not a soccer team. There's no winners or losers on this. Everyone's a winner when you get in here. Some of the wins are sometimes, from what I understand, sometimes they're 10 years out. Sometimes they're pretty quick. But if you're a part of it, it's a good thing. And remember that other people want to be a part of it. And just remind yourself, everybody knows these rules. Most of the stuff that we talked about today is common sense. It's just remembering it that when you're passionate about something, or when you're unfamiliar with the technology, or you disagree with someone, that ability to take a few seconds, slow your voice down. Pat is really good about, she gave a great thing a little while ago to the board about doing that. It helps you breathe. And, Mark Kearney, you mentioned that too. He's really good about that. He just calms down, doesn't say, he doesn't glance around, he doesn't get excited, and he moves forward. And there are other people who just talk like this really fast and, use 3-word statements. All effective communication styles, all part of being team members in your role, but be comfortable about what you have. So I'm going to ask again if there's any questions. And also, if there's something in here that really helped you or you disagree with, I want to hear it right now too, right? It's an informal part of the conversation. But, any key takeaways, something you say, yeah, I'm going to remember to do that. Yes, this will be really helpful on my committee meeting. This is a time to share. This is more the discussion part rather than the presentation part. Nancy, do you still want to talk, or did you just not unmute?
I'm listening.
Oh, that's
No, I
okay.
say thank you. No, this is helping me because I do talk fast because I'm deaf and blind, but it's telling me how I can present my what I'm doing to my group, and it's showing me that you guys are helping me and guiding me the way I should talk and present, my group by talking slow and understanding and who take control, and I want to say thank you.
Well,
It's helping me.
thank you. It's really important to hear all the voices. And I mean that sincerely, because, I come in this position, and what I do from a position of privilege. I've had 30 years of this in a professional environment without, a lot of lived experience, but just a lot of secondhand experience. So the more secondhand experience I get, the better off everyone is. So thank you for that. Great. Chantel, you've unmuted.
Oh, yes. Now that I've finished cooking the chicken, I apologize for not being muted earlier. I thought I was. So I just want to say thank you as well, and to kind of reflect on what I noticed from being in different meetings where maybe I am chair, maybe I am not, but also the familiarity with the people that are there, because I notice there are a lot of us, not only at the BC affiliate, but throughout the years of AEBC's existence, we are very loyal to each other. So we become very comfortable with one another. But sometimes we have to remember, like you say, that there's a line there that you need to respect, maybe certain boundaries. The comfort can't exceed the being, I don't want to use the word just polite, but being careful that you're not really too simple, hurting someone's feelings. You're not, you know, that you need to really be conscious of the words that you're using to express what you want to say, I guess is what because I've noticed even in the BC affiliate chat sometimes, you know, things get a little out of hand, and we all know Louise as host does absolutely awesome at kind of keeping things under control. But every once in a while it does get out of hand, and someone will say, well, this other person did it, so I thought I could too. It doesn't really work that way. Everybody kind of needs to really have checks and balances all the time, and to make sure that everyone can participate equally without feeling intimidated. Thank you. This was awesome, by the way.
Oh, thanks, Chantal. And you know, if everyone feels there's a need for you know, a conversation around, I don't want to call it crisis communications, but speaking under fire, or you know, controlling a meeting when you know all hell breaks loose, you know, we can talk about that too, right? You know, that's there's a real skill to doing that, something that takes a long time to manage, and something I'm still learning. But it has happened in many situations. But I can tell you, you know, this is a passionate group, but it's a pleasure working with you compared to a lot of organizations. And I'm sure we've all had experiences with it. And it's come to the point in sometimes where I've just kicked people out of the meeting, and it never had to do that with AEBC. So that's good. That's a good thing.
Lehigh Chilton, I just wanted to add one thing that, at least something that I do in some of these meetings, and that's to, you know, keep a sense of humor, both in terms of being able to, you know, giggle when somebody says something funny, and sometimes it's the easiest way to say something is with, you know, just a touch of humor and humility, and it just goes over much more smoothly. And just to, you know, add to what Linda said, one thing that we do a lot, and I think it's really good, is to praise in public, but criticize in private. So if you've got something nice to say, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I think it's time to go offline.
No, and that's a great summation, Hilton. Is yeah, praise in public and criticize in private. And you know, the humor is really good. You know, we don't have an HR department, so you know we have to manage our own humor ourselves. But that's a good thing. Humor can be great at diffusing a situation, or also expressing your own tone. You know, that you know, to let people know that you know you may have a strong feeling about this, but it isn't personal. And so you know you can have that lightheartedness with it. So, but it's, you know what, it's okay. You know, it's an organization that has a purpose, and sometimes that purpose isn't popular, it isn't understood, and I get that it can be really frustrating. And so we just have to remember that's okay. You know, that's where you take control, let everybody cool down, or that person cool down, and move on with it. Right? Because in the end, if we all pulled in the same direction, we'd all fall over. Right? So that's a way. You know, you just need some of that dynamic tension. It's not always comfortable, but it can be productive when managed appropriately. So if there's no one else that has anything to say for the formal part of the presentation, sorry, yes, someone did. I missed that.
Louise.
Oh, hi, Louise.
Okay, I want to follow up with that because sometimes, and this is a very important part of a meeting or a chat or a group, doing advocacy work, whatever, you have a domineering, we might have people who are domineering who think, they easily will speak out but you've got the ones sitting in the background who are quieter, who will sit back and just not talk because and you're trying to get them engaged in a conversation to get their feedback. Sometimes the dominant ones just want to override that. Can you give some advice how to maybe, make a person who's chairing or the people who are trying to manage that situation feel more comfortable that they are doing the right thing at all times? And I don't know if I worded it properly.
I think I understand what you're asking is, again, sometimes it comes down to timing. It may not work the first time, or you may, if you identify the problem and those simple clues such as, thank you, we're going to let someone else speak now. Something like that is really important to do because again, people don't always remember that they're, being a little too passionate. You just do that simple thing. And it's okay as chair just to say, we're going to move on to this situation, or I'm going to ask you to hold that comment so that everybody else has a chance, right? But what's important is the next time you're having the meeting, right? Because very few of our meetings are one-offs. Is to have that quick conversation at the beginning, right? Set some ground rules. Someone mentioned that. Sorry, I don't remember exactly who it was that said ground
Nancy.
rules. Yeah, thanks, Nancy. That was you. But say remember how we're going to do it is this. We're going to let everybody speak for 2 minutes. I'm going to check and then move on, and everybody has a chance to do that. There's also a way is if you think that someone has a valuable thing of putting it, but they're just not the easiest person to deal with. If you have to start managing personalities, it really takes a lot of different skills. And sometimes if I ever go into a situation and I have where I'm working with very strong personalities, what you do is you set up the rules of engagement in the beginning. And so let's use this meeting as an example. If I came in and I looked at the people and I said, oh man, got to deal with these people again, I would say, all right, so when we ask the questions, when we have the discussion, there's a lot of people here who have some great information, but this is a team environment. And so how I'm going to do it is I'm going to ask everybody in turn to speak and ask the most dominant person to speak second last. And the second most dominant person to speak last. Because the reality is if the most dominant person knows they're going to be last, they're going to interrupt. But give them the chance, but let some of the people, not necessarily someone who never speaks up, don't ask them first because you might put them in an awkward position. But, hey, you know what? I know Chantel will say something, but she won't go on forever. So I'm going to ask Chantel first. And then I know, that Hilton, he speaks up when he's asked, but he doesn't interrupt. So I'm going to ask him next. And sorry if I'm stereotyping. I'm just using you two as an example because I know you understand where I'm going from. And then you go around to the very end and you say, Lee, I'm going to let you go first, and then I'm going to ask Marcy, right? Because I'm going to talk, I'm going to have my opinion, but then you also know Marcy's strong enough to say, okay, I'm next, or whatever, right? So you let that you let that play out. That's an advanced tip, and you have to be careful about that. But again, just setting the ground rules and following them is important. And like I said, most people take direction really, really well if it's done offline and say, you know what, that discussion didn't go as well as we could. Can we do it differently next time? And call in help. If it comes to that point, call in help. So it's 9:15. And we've had a few drop off because we went a little bit over our formal time, but I'm going to close out this training now. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Great interaction, good reminders when I miss something, some great segues, great summations, and really good interaction and questions. I appreciate that. And for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, remember to subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, make comments in the section, and ask us at info@AEBC any questions about this YouTube presentation, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. This helps reach our content out more and get more viewers, and you'll also get notifications in YouTube when we post new stuff. So that's great. And of course, you can always become a member too. Thanks. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we can have an informal discussion if someone is less comfortable speaking during the recording. And always remember, if anything that comes up after this conversation, reach out to me and we can discuss it. So again, thank you, everyone.